A millionaire said indecent things in Russian, thinking his maid was pure and ignorant, but she understood every word. The desire that grew between them was written in codes and scars. If you like love and romance stories, watch until the end, subscribe to this channel, and leave a comment saying where you're listening. On the highest floors of a mirrored skyscraper in Canary Wharf, enveloped in London mist, silent luxury and access codes, lives Alexander Volkov, a magnate of digital security and global cryptography, admired by few, feared by many, and truly known by none. At 39, he inhabits a world where affection is a system failure and love a vulnerable code he learned to keep outside his emotional firewalls. Tall, with eyes as icy as a London winter and an overwhelming presence, Alexander collects contemporary Brazilian art, state-of-the-art surveillance systems, and sterile relationships, guided by pleasure but never by intimacy. Anything too close, too human, he reprograms as a threat. Son of Russian immigrants who arrived in the UK in the 80s, Alexander grew up speaking two languages, but living a single truth: vulnerability kills. His father, a former systems engineer in Moscow, built a technology empire in the UK, but died when Alexander was just 15, assassinated by rivals who coveted the company's military contracts. His mother, Katrina, was never the same. She married again, this time to a London businessman who adopted Alexander and gave him the surname he carries today. But the ice-blue-eyed Russian boy never forgot where he came from, nor the price one pays for trusting the wrong people. The apartment on the 40th floor of Canary Wharf's most exclusive building is a perfect reflection of who Alexander has become. Everything is controlled: the ambient temperature, the lighting that adjusts according to mood detected by biometric sensors, the polarized windows that can become completely opaque with a voice command. On the walls, paintings by Beatriz Milazis and Vic Muniz share space with monitors displaying security cameras spread throughout the city. Alexander doesn't just live in London, he observes it, controls it, possesses it in a way few men can imagine. 5 years ago, everything changed. Anna, his Brazilian wife, 6 months pregnant with their first child, died in an attack at Westfield, London. What seemed like just another violent robbery in the capital revealed itself to be something far more sinister when Alexander discovered, too late, that Anna worked for an industrial espionage network that specifically targeted his company. The woman he loved, who carried his child, had married him under superior orders. The baby she was expecting was merely part of the charade to gain his complete trust. Since then, Alexander transformed desire into discipline and pleasure into punishment. For him, the only way to feel in control is through domination, verbal, symbolic, psychological. He would never again let anyone touch him where he couldn't track them. The Russian he learned in childhood became his secret language, the idiom where he allows himself to be who he truly is, a broken man who needs to break others to feel whole. It is into this isolated and controlled daily life that Clara Blackwood enters. Brazilian, 23 years old, hired by the elite cleaning company Crystal Service to work 3 times a week in the Millionaire's apartment. Data about her is scarce. An orphan raised by an elderly grandmother in a small town in rural Yorkshire, she moved to London just 2 months ago in search of work. She speaks softly, dresses modestly in clothes that have clearly seen better days, and avoids direct eye contact. Clara seems to fit perfectly the type of presence Alexander tolerates: silent, obedient, and invisible. In the first week, she is almost a ghost. She always arrives promptly at 7 in the morning on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, when Alexander has already left for the private gym in the building's basement. She uses the service elevator, enters with the code she received from management, performs her cleaning routine in absolute silence, and leaves before he returns. She leaves everything impeccable: the Carrara marble floor polished like a mirror, the windows without a single mark, the objects exactly in their original positions. She is efficient, discreet, invisible. But there is something different about the way she moves through the apartment. Alexander first notices it through the security cameras he religiously reviews every night. Clara doesn't clean like someone merely performing a task, she observes. She lingers a few seconds longer in front of the paintings, especially an original Kandinsky that dominates the main living room wall. She runs her fingers with excessive delicacy over the spines of the books on the shelf, Russian books that any ordinary cleaner wouldn't even notice. There's a strange familiarity in her gestures, as if she understands that those objects hold meaning beyond their material value. In the third week, Alexander decides to break the routine. He returns early from the gym and finds her in the living room, kneeling before the bookshelf, meticulously cleaning each shelf. She doesn't hear him arrive. She's completely absorbed in the task, softly whispering something to herself. When she finally notices his presence, she's genuinely startled, dropping the cleaning cloth and quickly standing up, head bowed. "I'm sorry. Mr. Volkov, I didn't know you were back." Her voice is soft, with a subtle Yorkshire accent that should sound common, but there's something in her pronunciation that intrigues him, a precision in the consonants that doesn't match the profile of a cleaner from the countryside. "You were whispering something," he observes, walking slowly to the bookshelf. "What was it?" Clara hesitates, still with her head bowed. "Nothing important, sir. I was just admiring the books. They're very beautiful." Alexander picks up one of the volumes, a first edition of Crime and Punishment in original Russian, and extends it to her. "Can you read?" "Of course I can read, sir." There's a slight tone of offense in her voice, quickly suppressed. "Sorry, I mean, yes, I can read in Portuguese, and in other languages." The silence stretches for a few seconds. Clara quickly glances at the book in her hands, then lowers her eyes again. "No, sir, just Portuguese." He observes her reaction with scientific interest. There are microscopic signs of lying. A slight twitch at the corner of her left eye, fingers that contract almost imperceptibly, breathing that accelerates for a fraction of a second. Alexander spent years learning to read people like source code, and Clara Blackwood has bugs in her programming. "You may continue your work," he says finally, placing the book back on the shelf. "I just don't want to be disturbed." He sits in the Italian leather armchair with his back to her, opens his laptop and begins to work, but all his senses are focused on the woman who has resumed cleaning behind him. Clara moves even more silently now, aware that she is being watched, but there is something different about the way she handles the Russian objects on the shelf, her reverence that goes beyond professional care. When she finishes and politely says goodbye, Alexander waits for her to enter the elevator and immediately accesses the security camera recordings. He rewinds to the moment she was alone, whispering in front of the books. He maximizes the volume, filters out background noise with state-of-the-art software, and isolates the audio. What he hears leaves him immobile for several minutes. Clara was reciting verses by Pushkin, in Russian, with perfect pronunciation. That night, Alexander does something he hasn't done in years. He calls his contacts in London's Russian community. The colony is small, closed, everyone knows each other. If Clara Blackwood has any connection to Russians in the city, someone will know. But the answers are frustrating. No one knows a Clara Blackwood. No Russian family has employed a housekeeper with that name in recent months. He hires a discreet private investigation. He wants to know everything about Clara's life, where she was born, how she grew up, why she came to London, where she lives now. While awaiting the results, he decides to conduct his own tests. The following Tuesday, when Clara arrives, Alexander is in the living room conducting a video conference in Russian with business partners in Moscow. He speaks loudly and deliberately, discussing complex technical details about encryption systems. From time to time, he discreetly glances in her direction, as she cleans the open-plan kitchen integrated into the living room. Clara maintains a neutral expression, focused on her work, but Alexander notices small involuntary reactions. When he mentions systemy bezopasnosti, security systems, she stops wiping the counter for a second. When he talks about cryptographiczkie algoritmy, cryptographic algorithms, she slightly tilts her head like someone trying to listen better. The decisive test comes when Alexander, seemingly frustrated with the call, curses loudly in Russian. "Да что за черт с этими идиотами?" What the hell with these idiots? Clara flinches almost imperceptibly, an automatic reaction from someone who understands exactly what was said. After the call ends, Alexander approaches the kitchen where she is working. "Sorry about the noise. International business is complicated." "No problem, Mr. Volkov, I barely noticed. Have you never heard Russian spoken before?" Clara hesitates for a fraction of a second. "I don't think so, sir." I couldn't say. It's an interesting language, very expressive. He leans against the counter, observing her intently. Sometimes words can sound aggressive even when they're not. I imagine so, sir. For example, if I said, "Ты понимаешь русский язык," you understand Russian, it would sound very threatening to someone who doesn't know the language. Clara continues cleaning, but Alexander notices her movements have become slightly more tense. I wouldn't understand, sir. You can speak freely. It's an intelligent response. She acknowledges he's testing her but maintains her denial. Alexander smiles for the first time in weeks. There's more substance to this woman than she wants to let on. That afternoon he makes a decision. If Clara Blackwood wants to play, he will raise the stakes. He will find out who she really is and what she wants from him. And if she is lying about something important, he will make her pay for it in the only way he knows, through absolute control. Because Alexander Volkov learned long ago that in his world, you either control or are controlled. And he will never again allow himself to be controlled. As he watches Clara put away her cleaning supplies and politely say goodbye, Alexander is already formulating his next move. Tomorrow he will accidentally leave some documents in Russian scattered on the table. He will see if her curiosity is stronger than her caution, and if it is, he will finally discover what game this mysterious woman is playing with him. But Alexander doesn't imagine that. On the other side of the city, in a small apartment in the East End of London, Clara Blackwood is sitting before an old mirror, brushing her hair and whispering to her reflection in Russian. He knows. He's starting to know. And for the first time since she arrived in London, she smiles. A smile that mixes fear, excitement, and something she cannot yet name, but which makes her heart race whenever she thinks of Alexander Volkov's icy eyes watching her. The game has just begun, and neither of them knows yet who is truly hunting whom. The following Thursday, Alexander leaves an open folder on the dining table. Confidential documents in Russian scattered, as if he had been interrupted during an important meeting. He hides in the office with the door ajar, from where he can observe Clara unseen. He wants to see if she will succumb to curiosity or manage to maintain the pretense of understanding nothing. Clara enters the apartment promptly at 7 in the morning, as always. She starts in the living room, methodically cleaning each surface. When she reaches the dining table, she pauses before the documents. Alexander observes every micro-expression on her face through the security cameras he monitors on his phone. She looks around, making sure she is alone, then leans slightly over the papers. Her eyes move from left to right, clearly reading. Alexander zooms in the camera and sees that she is frowning slightly, concentrating. She is not just looking at the documents, she is analyzing the content. Her lips move almost imperceptibly, mentally translating some more complex words. When she finishes reading, Alexander sees something he did not expect. Clara picks up a pen that was on the table and quickly jots something down in the corner of one of the pages. She writes in Russian, with fluid and elegant handwriting. Then, as if awakened from a trance, she looks around nervously, quickly erases what she wrote and continues with the cleaning. But Alexander saw everything. And more importantly, he recorded everything. When Clara leaves, he examines the documents. In the corner of the page where she wrote, there are still faint marks from the pencil she tried to erase. With a magnifying glass, he can read, "Ошибка в третьем параграфе," error in the third paragraph. And she was right. There was a subtle error in the translation of a technical term that not even some of his native Russian employees had noticed. Clara Blackwood not only understood Russian, she mastered the language to the point of identifying complex technical errors. More than that, she had the audacity to correct them, even knowing she shouldn't be reading the documents. Alexander feels a mixture of anger and fascination. This woman is blatantly lying to him, invading his privacy, yet at the same time demonstrating an intelligence and knowledge that profoundly intrigue him. He decides it's time to confront her directly. On Saturday, when Clara arrives, Alexander is waiting in the living room. He wasn't pretending to be doing something else or observing secretly. He is sitting in the leather armchair, wearing only black dress trousers and a white shirt with the first 3 buttons open, watching her with those piercing blue eyes. "Clara," he says with a controlled voice, "sit down. I need to talk to you." She hesitates, clearly uncomfortable. Mr. Volkov, I need to work. If I'm late, sit down. The order comes in a tone that brooks no argument. Clara sits on the edge of the sofa, still holding her cleaning supplies, as if for protection. Alexander stands up and walks slowly until he is standing before her. The height difference is intimidating. Him at 6 feet 3 inches against her, who must be no more than 5 feet 5 inches. On Thursday, you read my documents. It's not a question. It's a statement. Clara raises her eyes for the first time, meeting his gaze. I don't know what you're talking about, sir. And you corrected an error in the translation. Her face pales slightly, but she maintains a neutral expression. Mr. Volkov, I don't understand Russian. I already told you that. Alexander leans in, placing his hands on the arms of the sofa, one on each side of her body. Now he is so close he can smell the faint perfume she wears, something inexpensive, probably bought at a chemist, but which on her skin becomes almost addictive. Мне надоели твои игры. I'm tired of your games, he whispers in Russian, intently watching her reaction. Clara swallows hard but doesn't avert her gaze. I don't understand. Ты понимаешь каждое слово, you understand every word. This time she can't hide it. Her eyes widen slightly and Alexander sees she's holding her breath. Почему ты лжешь мне? Why are you lying to me? The silence stretches for long seconds. Alexander can hear her accelerated heartbeat, can see the vein in her neck pulsing rapidly. Finally, Clara closes her eyes, and when she opens them again, her entire posture has changed. She is no longer the timid, submissive cleaner. There is determination in her gaze, a dignity she had kept hidden. «Потому что мне нужна эта работа. Because I need this job», she replies in perfect Russian, with a slight accent that Alexander immediately recognizes as being from the St. Petersburg region. The revelation is like a punch to the gut. Alexander steps back, processing what he just heard. Her accent is almost identical to that of his late wife, Anna, who had been born in St. Petersburg before moving to the UK as a child. «Откуда ты знаешь русский?» Where do you know Russian from? As he asks, returning to the language he now knows they both share. Clara stands up, finally abandoning her submissive posture. «Моя бабушка научила меня, my grandmother taught me. Was your grandmother Russian?» For the first time, Clara hesitates. Alexander realizes they have reached dangerous territory for her. «Это сложно, it's complicated», she finally replies. Alexander feels he is facing an enigma much larger than he imagined. A Brazilian cleaner who speaks Russian with a St. Petersburg accent, raised by a grandmother with a mysterious past. The pieces begin to form in his mind, but the picture is still incomplete. «Why did you lie about not understanding?» he asks, returning to Portuguese. Clara looks around the luxurious apartment, then back at him. «Because men like you don't hire people like me when they know we are more than we appear». The answer is intelligent and honest. Alexander feels a pang of something he hasn't experienced in years, genuine respect for someone. «And what are you really, Clara Blackwood?» She smiles for the first time since they met. It's a sad smile, laden with secrets. A woman trying to survive in a city that isn't hers, with knowledge she shouldn't have, and memories she'd rather forget. Alexander sits down again, gesturing for her to do the same. This time, she settles more naturally on the sofa. «Tell me about your grandmother». Clara remains silent for a long moment, clearly debating internally how much she can reveal. Her name was Natalia Petrov. She came to the UK in the 80s, pregnant and alone. She never spoke much about the past, but she taught me Russian from a young age. She said it was important to keep the language alive even far from home. «And your parents?» «My mother disappeared when I was 12. She left home one morning saying she was going to sort something important out and never came back. My father, I never knew him». Alexander feels a shiver of recognition. The story echoes elements of his own life: Russian immigrants, mysterious disappearances, family secrets. «Where did your grandmother live?» «Harrogate in North Yorkshire, a small town where no one asked questions about the past of a lonely old Russian woman». «And she died?» 3 months ago». Clara's voice falters slightly. «Cancer. In her last days she was very delirious, speaking in Russian about things I didn't fully understand. About codes, about people she had known, about a man named Dmitri whom she loved, but who had betrayed everything». The name strikes Alexander like lightning. Dmitry Volkov was his father's true name, before adopting his second wife's British surname. Dmitry Volkov, who died assassinated when Alexander was 15. Dmitry Volkov, about whom Alexander's mother always refused to speak in detail. Dmitry, he repeats slowly. Clara observes him carefully. Do you know that name, sir? Alexander stands up abruptly, walking to the window. His mind is processing information at maximum speed. If Clara's grandmother knew his father, if she came to the UK pregnant in the 80s, if she spoke of betrayal, how old would your mother be today? He asks without turning around. 42 years old. She was born in 1982. The dates coincide. Dmitry Volkov arrived in the UK in 1981, married Alexander's mother in 1983. If Natalia arrived pregnant in 1982, Alexander slowly turns to face Clara. Show me a photo of your mother. Clara hesitates, but takes out an old worn wallet from her pocket. From inside, she pulls out a small faded photo of a young woman holding a baby. The woman has striking Slavic features, blonde hair and clear blue eyes. Alexander feels the world spin around him. The woman in the photo bears a disturbing resemblance to his late wife, Anna. More than that, there's something familiar in her features that he can't immediately identify. What was your mother's name? Anya Petrov, but here in the UK she used Anna. Anya Anna, 2 names, 2 women, 2 periods of his life. Alexander feels he is facing an impossible coincidence or a conspiracy that goes far beyond what he can comprehend. Clara, he says with a controlled voice, though inside he's panicking, I need you to be completely honest with me. Why did you really come to work here? Why my apartment specifically? Clara observes him for a long moment. Alexander can see she's making a crucial decision, weighing risks and benefits, because in her last days, my grandmother made me promise I would find you. The confession drops like a bomb in the apartment's silence. She knew you? Alexander asks, though he already suspected the answer. She knew your father, and she said you were the only person in the world who could help me find out what happened to my mother. Alexander sinks heavily into the armchair. His entire carefully controlled life is crumbling before his eyes. The mysterious cleaner is not just a woman who lies about understanding Russian. She is connected to his past in a way he doesn't yet fully comprehend. What else did your grandmother tell you about me? That you were dangerous, that you had inherited your father's genius, but also his paranoia, that you lived in a glass prison high above the city, protecting yourself from enemies that perhaps no longer even existed. Clara pauses, and that despite all this, you were the only person she would trust to protect her granddaughter. The words hit Alexander like physical blows. Every description is painfully accurate. His grandmother knew intimate details about his life, his personality, his fears. There's something else, Clara continues, seeing he won't respond. Before she died, she gave me this. Clara removes a thin chain from her neck, almost invisible beneath her blouse. At its end, there's a small pendant that Alexander immediately recognizes. It's a digital key, the kind used in advanced encryption systems from the 80s. His father used an identical one. She said that when the time came, you would know what to do with it. Alexander extends his hand and Clara places the chain in his palm. The metal is still warm from her skin. When their fingers touch, he feels an electrical current that has nothing to do with technology. Clara, he says, his voice hoarser than he intended, do you have any idea of the danger you might be in? I do. She looks him directly in the eyes. But I'd rather face danger alongside someone who can help me find answers than live forever without knowing the truth. Alexander closes his hand around the key, feeling its weight. It's impossible for it to be a coincidence. Natalia Petrov planned all of this. Somehow she knew that one day Clara would reach him. If you want answers, he says finally, you'll have to trust me completely. And that means no more lying, no matter how dangerous the truth might be. And you? Clara asks. And will you trust me? It's a fair question. Alexander spent years protecting himself, creating layers of security between himself and the world. Trusting someone goes against all his survival instincts. But looking at Clara, no longer the submissive cleaner, but the intelligent and determined woman she truly is, Alexander feels something he hasn't experienced in a long time. It's not just physical attraction, though that is also present. It's recognition. as if she were a part of himself he didn't know was missing. "I'll try," he replies honestly. Clara smiles, and this time it's a genuine smile, without shadows of secrets. "So where do we start?" Alexander looks at the key in his hand, then at the woman before him. "We start by finding out what information your grandmother left hidden in this key. And then," he pauses, "then we find out why two people dead for decades are trying to bring us together." But as he speaks, Alexander can't stop thinking about their closeness on the sofa, how Clara's soft perfume seems to fill the entire apartment, the electrical current he felt when their fingers touched. There's something between them that goes far beyond family secrets and past conspiracies, and for the first time in years, Alexander Volkov wonders if he's ready to let someone cross all his defenses. Because looking at Clara Blackwood, or whoever she truly is, he has the disturbing feeling that she might be both his salvation and his destruction. And perhaps, just perhaps, the two things are one and the same. "One last thing," Clara says, standing up from the sofa. "My grandmother made me promise one more thing before she died." "What?" "That I would never let you face the past alone. No matter what we discovered, no matter how dangerous it was." She moves closer to him, until they are just inches apart. "She said you had already lost too many people by carrying the weight of the world alone." Alexander feels his breathing quicken. Clara's proximity is doing strange things to his self-control. He had always been the predator in any situation, always the one who dominated and controlled. But there is something in the way she looks at him that makes him feel exposed, vulnerable. "Your grandmother seemed to know me better than I know myself. Perhaps because she spent decades thinking about you," Clara whispers, dreaming of the day she could right the wrongs of the past through us. The word "us" resonates in the air between them, laden with possibilities and unspoken promises. Alexander raises his hand, almost touching Clara's face, but stops at the last second. Not yet. There are too many secrets, too many lies, too much danger. But when Clara leans almost imperceptibly towards his hand, Alexander knows it's only a matter of time until all his defenses completely crumble. And for the first time in years, he isn't sure he wants to protect himself from it. That same night, Alexander cancels all appointments and locks himself in the office with Clara. The room, normally cold and impersonal, gains a strange intimacy with her presence. Clara watches fascinated as he connects the digital key to a specialized computer, his fingers flying over the keyboard with the precision of a surgeon. "Your grandmother chose the moment well," Alexander murmurs, focused on the screen. This type of encryption was years ahead of its time in the 80s. Few people in the world knew how to create something like this. Clara moves closer, standing behind his chair. Alexander can feel the warmth of her body, her soft perfume mixed with something more primal, the scent of her skin. He forces himself to concentrate on the code being deciphered on the screen. "Can you read this?" she asks, pointing to the lines of code that appear. It's not ordinary code. It's a layered system, like Russian nesting dolls. Each unlocked security level reveals another deeper level. Alexander stops typing and turns in his chair to look at her. "Your grandmother wasn't an ordinary translator, Clara. This is the work of someone with access to the highest levels of Soviet intelligence." Clara's face pales. "She always said she worked translating technical documents." "Top-secret technical documents," Alexander corrects. "Look at this." On the screen, a list of names appears. Alexander recognizes some. Russian agents who operated in the UK during the 80s, Brazilian businessmen who maintained suspicious contacts with the Soviet government. And in the middle of the list, highlighted in red, Dmitry Volkov. "My father," Alexander whispers. Clara places her hand on his shoulder, a gesture of comfort that surprises him with its naturalness. "What is he marked as?" Alexander clicks on the name and a detailed file opens. Photos, documents, reports. His breath catches in his throat when he reads the classification. Agent двойной игры. Status ликвидирован. Double agent. Status eliminated. He wasn't assassinated by commercial rivals, Alexander says, his voice tense. He was executed for being a double agent. Clara kneels beside his chair, forcing him to look her in the eyes. "Alexander, listen to me. Whatever your father did, it doesn't define who you are." But Alexander barely hears her. His hands fly over the keyboard again, opening more files. The truth about his family is brutally and relentlessly revealing itself before him. Here, he says, pointing to another document. Natalia Petrov, your grandmother. She wasn't just a translator. She was a senior analyst, specializing in identifying double agents. Alexander turns to Clara with eyes that mix pain and anger. Your grandmother was responsible for uncovering my father's betrayal. The silence that follows is deafening. Clara slowly stands up, processing the information. That means that your grandmother caused my father's death. Alexander finishes the sentence, standing up as well. The distance between them now seems insurmountable. Clara shakes her head vigorously. No, there has to be more. My grandmother wasn't a killer. And if she caused your father's death, why would she spend decades planning to bring us together? Alexander walks to the window, looking at the lights of London stretching to the horizon. Perhaps that's exactly it, guilt. Remorse for having destroyed a family. Or perhaps, Clara says, approaching cautiously, she knew something these files don't show. Alexander wants to reject her, wants her to leave and take with her all the complications she brought into his ordered life. But when Clara places her hand on his arm, he feels an electrical current that goes far beyond the physical. Keep investigating, she whispers. Please, there are more files. Against his better judgment, Alexander returns to the computer. Clara sits on the edge of the desk, her legs almost touching his arm. The proximity is disturbing and comforting at the same time. The next level of encryption reveals personal correspondence. Emails between Natalia and Dmitri, dating back to 1981, shortly before Dmitri arrived in the UK. Alexander reads in silence, his expression gradually changing from anger to confusion, then to something akin to understanding. They loved each other, he says finally. Clara leans over his shoulder to read. How is that possible? Natalia discovered Dmitri was a double agent because she herself was passing information to him. They were lovers. She was pregnant with his child when she was forced to turn him in. The puzzle pieces begin to fit together, painfully and beautifully at the same time. Your mother is Anna's half-sister, my wife, Alexander continues, his voice almost a whisper. Daughters of the same father, born a year apart. Clara remains still. That means we are not related, Alexander hurries to clarify. Anna was Dmitri's daughter with another woman in the UK. You are Natalia's granddaughter with Dmitri. There is no common blood between us. The relief on Clara's face is palpable. But there's something more. An intensity in her gaze that makes Alexander's heart race. But there's something else, he continues, opening the last file. Your mother, Anya. The screen shows a photo that makes them both freeze. It's Anna, Alexander's dead wife, but years younger. Beside the photo, a complete file. Anya Petrov, born in 1982. Daughter of Natalia Petrov and Dmitri Volkov. Mission, infiltration and surveillance of Alexander Volkov. Status, disappeared 2010. My mother was an agent, Clara whispers, her voice breaking. She came to London to watch me. And Anna? Alexander feels nausea rising in his throat. Anna was another agent, probably recruited by the same organization your mother was part of. The truth is brutal. Alexander spent his life being manipulated by women who were trained to seduce him, control him, extract information from him. His wife, Clara's mother, all were pieces in a much larger game. But why did my grandmother bring us together? Clara asks, tears streaming down her face. If we are products of a conspiracy... Alexander abruptly closes the computer and turns to her, because perhaps she realized she created monsters, that she destroyed innocence, and perhaps, he hesitates, perhaps she believed we could save each other. Clara slides off the desk and stands before him. They are so close that Alexander can see small golden flecks in her brown eyes, can count each lash wet with tears. Alexander, she whispers, I don't care why we're here. I don't care what our families did or failed to do. I only care about what we feel now in this moment. The confession hits Alexander like a physical blow. All his defenses, all his protective mechanisms are screaming at him to pull away, to send her away before she can hurt him as all the other women have. But there is something in the way Clara looks at him, without artifice, without manipulation, just raw, honest desire, that breaks all his resistance. Clara, he says, his voice hoarse, if you stay, if we do this, there's no going back. I don't know how to love without possessing, how to surrender without wanting to control everything. Then control me, she replies, surprising him. Possess me. I am not fragile, Alexander. I have survived decades of lies, grown up raised by a woman tormented by guilt and secrets. I can handle your need for control if you can handle my need for truth. Her answer unleashes something primal in Alexander. In a swift movement, he presses her against the office wall, his hands on either side of her face. Clara doesn't flinch, doesn't show fear. Instead, her eyes ignite with a desire that mirrors his own. You don't know what you're asking for. He murmurs against her lips. I know exactly what I'm asking for, she replies, her hands rising to touch his face. I'm asking you to stop protecting yourself from me. Alexander then kisses her, and it's not a gentle or hesitant kiss. It's possessive, desperate, laden with years of loneliness and repressed need. Clara responds with equal intensity, her nails digging into his shoulders through his shirt. When they finally separate, both are breathless. Your bedroom, Clara whispers against his mouth. Now! Alexander picks her up without ceremony, and Clara wraps her legs around his waist. The path to the bedroom is a series of urgent kisses and impatient hands. Alexander sets her down on the edge of the giant bed, pulling back just enough to look at her. Clara's hair is disheveled, her lips swollen from kisses, her blouse slightly wrinkled. But it's her eyes that capture him, dark with desire, but also full of determination and confidence. Last chance to change your mind, he warns. Stop talking and touch me, she replies, beginning to unbutton her own blouse. Alexander feels any last shred of self-control disappear. In seconds he is kneeling before her, his large hands encompassing her delicate waist, his mouth finding the exposed skin on her neck. Clara arches her back, her hands burying themselves in his dark hair. Alexander, she moans, and the sound of his name on her lips is almost enough to make him completely lose his reason. He stops, looking at her. Are you sure? Once we cross this line... I crossed this line the moment I entered your apartment, Clara replies, pulling him up to her. I fell in love with you even before I admitted it to myself. Everything else was just a pretext. The confession breaks Alexander's last resistances. He kisses her again, and this time there is no hesitation, no doubt. There is only need, desire, and something deeper that neither of them is ready to name yet. Clothes disappear between urgent caresses and whispers in Russian and Portuguese. When Alexander finally possesses her completely, Clara cries out his name with an intensity that echoes through the silent apartment. Afterwards, as she sleeps nestled against his chest, Alexander lies awake, looking at the ceiling. For the first time in years, he is not analyzing potential threats or planning defensive moves. He is simply living the present moment, feeling Clara's soft breath against his skin, her delicate weight against his body. But the peace is interrupted by the insistent vibration of his cell phone on the nightstand. Alexander carefully reaches out to avoid waking Clara and checks the message. It's from an unknown number, but the message is in Russian. We know she's with you. We know what she found. You have 48 hours to deliver the files, or she will disappear like her mother. Alexander's blood freezes in his veins. He looks at Clara sleeping peacefully in his arms and knows they have just entered territory far more dangerous than any family secret. Someone was watching. Someone knew about the digital key, about the files they deciphered, about what they discovered. And now Clara was in the crosshairs. Alexander carefully slides out of bed and walks to the window. It's 3 in the morning, and London never fully sleeps. But the normal movement of the city below seems different now, threatening, as if invisible eyes were watching every shadow, every movement. He picks up his phone and quickly activates all the apartment's security systems. Motion sensors, thermal cameras, fingerprint scanners at all entrances. If anyone tries to approach, he will know. But as he configures the defenses, Alexander knows he cannot protect Clara forever hidden in his apartment. Whoever is hunting her has resources, has patience, and clearly has detailed information about them. He returns to bed and watches Clara sleep. Even in repose, there is a strength in her that impresses him. She is not the helpless victim many men in his position would try to protect. She is a survivor, a fighter, and if they are to face what is coming, it will be as partners, not as protector and protected. Alexander? Clara whispers, waking up. Are you okay? He lies down beside her again, pulling her into his arms. We received a message. Someone knows you're here. Clara stiffens but doesn't pull away. What do they want? Tonight, the files we deciphered. And probably you. Clara is silent for a moment, processing the information. Then, surprising him, she turns to look at him directly. Then let's give them what they want, she says. No, absolutely not. I won't. Listen, Clara interrupts him, placing her hand over his lips. We won't actually hand over the files. But we can use this as bait to find out who is behind this. Alexander removes her hand from his mouth, but keeps his fingers intertwined with hers. It's too dangerous. More dangerous than spending the rest of your life running? Clara asks. Alexander, they killed my mother. They probably killed your wife too. If we don't stop this now, we'll never stop. She is right, and Alexander knows it. But the idea of using Clara as bait goes against all his instincts. There's something else, Clara continues, her voice softening. The files mentioned other agents. Other families that were destroyed by this organization. If we can reach them, we can end everything at once, Alexander finishes, understanding her plan. Exactly. But we need to be smart, and we need to trust each other. Completely. Alexander looks at her in the darkness of the room. This woman who entered his life as a submissive cleaner revealed herself to be a born strategist, a courageous fighter, and now his passionate lover. If there's anyone in the world he can trust to face what's coming, it's her. All right, he says finally. But we do it my way, with every possible precaution. Clara smiles and kisses him softly. I wouldn't expect anything less from the most paranoid man in London. Paranoid and in love, Alexander corrects, surprising himself with his own honesty. In love? Clara repeats, her eyes shining even in the darkness. Hopelessly, he admits, and that terrifies me more than any external threat. Clara kisses him again, and this time there's a tenderness in the gesture that contrasts with the urgent passion of hours before. Then let's survive this together, she whispers against his lips. And then we'll find out what it's like to be happy without looking over our shoulders. Alexander pulls her closer, knowing that in the next 48 hours, their lives will change forever. Either they will manage to break the cycle of revenge and manipulation that has haunted their families for decades, or they will join the list of victims of a conspiracy that began long before they were born. But for the first time in his adult life, Alexander is not facing danger alone. And that, he realizes, makes all the difference in the world. As Clara falls asleep again in his arms, Alexander remains awake, planning. His analytical mind is already 3 steps ahead, anticipating movements, preparing counterattacks. Tomorrow the real hunt begins. And Alexander Volkov is ready to discover if love can be stronger than decades of fear and control. Dawn in London brings with it a dense mist that mixes with the pollution, creating a grey cloak over the city. Alexander has been standing at the office window for 2 hours, observing every movement on the street, every car that passes slower than usual, every pedestrian who looks up towards his building. Clara is sitting in the leather armchair, wearing one of his shirts that is too big for her, studying the printed files he prepared overnight. I found something, she says, pointing to a sequence of numbers in one of the documents. This code here repeats in several reports. Alexander approaches, leaning over her to get a better look. The proximity makes Clara shiver, even after the intimacy of the previous night. There is something in the way he moves, in the intensity of his focus, that constantly reminds her she is dealing with a predator, even if he is now her predator. It's a location code, he says, recognizing the pattern. Specific addresses in London where the organization maintained operations. Most are outdated, but this one, Clara points to an address in Shoreditch. It was updated just 3 months ago. Alexander studies the document with renewed attention. It's a commercial office, a perfect front for intelligence operations. He straightens up, making a decision. We'll use this. How? We'll reply to yesterday's message. We'll say we want to make a trade. The files for information about what happened to your mother. We'll set the meeting at this address. Clara stands up, walking towards him. And then? Then we find out who is behind this and end this story once and for all. Alexander gently touches her face. But first you're going to learn to defend yourself properly. The next few hours pass in intense preparation. Alexander teaches Clara basic combat techniques, how to use common objects as weapons, pressure points that can incapacitate an attacker. She learns quickly, her naturally agile reflexes being refined by his training. "You've done this before," Ahi observes when she perfectly executes a sequence of defensive moves. "My grandmother taught me some things when I was a child. She said a woman alone in the world needed to know how to protect herself." Clara pauses, realizing something. Now I understand why she was so insistent about it. As he trains her, Alexander can't help but admire Clara's determination. She absorbs every instruction, practices every move until she completely masters it. There is no fear in her eyes, only absolute focus. This is the woman he fell in love with, not a helpless victim, but a warrior in the making. At 2 in the afternoon, Alexander sends the reply, "I accept the exchange. Today, 6 p.m. at the address you already know. Come alone." The reply arrives in 15 minutes. "Confirmed. Don't try to deceive us, Volkov. We know exactly what you have and what it means to you." "They're trying to intimidate me," Alexander comments, showing the message to Clara. "Are they succeeding?" Alexander smiles, and there's something predatory in his expression. "No, they're motivating me." At 5 in the afternoon, they are on their way to Shoreditch. Alexander chose a discreet armored car, configured alternative escape routes, and positioned trusted men at strategic points around the address. Clara is by his side, wearing dark clothes Alexander provided, a small weapon hidden in a holster under her coat. "Nervous?" he asks as they park 2 blocks from the meeting location. "Eager," she corrects. "There's a difference." Alexander takes her hand, intertwining their fingers. "Clara, if something goes wrong—" "It won't," she interrupts him. "Trust me." The building is a common 3-story commercial edifice with several small businesses. The specific address corresponds to a security consultancy on the 2nd floor. It's ironic, Alexander thinks. They climb the stairs in silence. The corridor is empty, lit only by fluorescent lights that occasionally flicker. Alexander touches Clara's arm, signaling for her to stay slightly behind him. The consultancy door is open. Alexander enters first, all senses on high alert. The office is small, basically furnished, with a desk and a few chairs. Sitting behind the desk is a man of approximately 50, grey-haired with cold eyes. Beside him, a younger blonde woman who looks familiar to Alexander. "Mr. Volkov," the man says in Portuguese with a Russian accent, "and the beautiful Clara Blackwood. We finally meet. Who are you?" Alexander asks, keeping himself between Clara and the strangers. "I am Viktor Petrov," the man replies, Natalia Petrov's brother. "And this is Marina," he points to the blonde woman, "Dmitry Volkov and Anna Komarova's daughter. Your half-sister." Alexander's world stops for a moment. The woman before him has familiar features, his father's blue eyes, the jawline he recognizes in the mirror every morning. "Impossible," he whispers. "Very possible." Marina replies, speaking for the first time. Her voice has his same London accent. "I was born in the UK in 1979. My father abandoned me when he discovered my mother was also an agent. I was raised by Victor and Natalia." Clara steps forward. "You killed my mother." Victor smiles coldly. "Your mother became inconvenient." She was developing genuine feelings for Alexander, which compromised the mission. "What mission?" Alexander demands. "The same one that continues today," Marina replies. "Your company controls critical security systems for the British government. Systems that certain people would like to access. Industrial espionage," Clara understands. "You're still selling information." "We are surviving," Victor corrects. "When the Soviet Union fell, many of us were left without a country, without purpose. We created our own organization." Alexander feels anger building in his chest. "You destroyed entire families for money." "We destroyed enemies," Victor retorts. "Your father betrayed everything we believed in. He deserved to die." The conversation is interrupted when Clara quickly moves to the side, drawing her weapon from its holster. "Enough talk." Victor raises his hands, but he's smiling. "Do you really think we came alone?" The door behind them clicks shut loudly. Alexander turns and sees 2 armed men blocking the exit. His plan had been working perfectly until now, but this was a possibility he had considered. "The files," Victor extends his hand. "Now?" Alexander looks at Clara, who nods almost imperceptibly. "It's time to execute the second part of the plan. The files are not with us," Alexander says mutely. "Truth. They are in a secure location, Programmed to be automatically released to the British and international press if we don't receive a confirmation code every 2 hours. Alexander checks his watch. We have 40 minutes. Victor frowns. You're bluffing. Want to bet the existence of your organization on that? The silence stretches for long seconds. Finally, Victor gestures for the armed men to lower their weapons. What do you want? Answers, Clara says, keeping her weapon pointed at Victor. About my mother, about Anna's death, about everything. Marina slowly stands up. Your mother, Anya, was sent to watch Alexander in 2008. The mission was simple: seduce, marry, gain access to his company's information. But she really fell in love, Victor continues. When we found out, we gave an order: eliminate Alexander and extract all information she could before disappearing. And she refused, Clara whispers. She tried to escape, Marina confirms. She wanted to come to you, Alexander, tell you the truth, ask for protection. We didn't allow that. Alexander feels a terrible weight in his chest. You killed her because she loved me. We killed her because she was weak, Victor says coldly. Clara screams in rage and points the gun directly at Victor's heart. You killed my mother because she chose love over the mission. Clara, no, Alexander says softly. Don't become like them. For a moment, Clara hesitates. Her eyes are filled with tears and fury. Then, slowly, she lowers the weapon a few inches. You're right, she says. But they will pay. It is at this moment that Alexander activates the device hidden in his pocket. Immediately, all the lights in the building go out. It's the signal for his security team positioned outside. In the darkness that follows, there are shouts, sounds of struggle, muffled gunshots. Alexander takes Clara by the hand and guides her to the corner of the office he had previously memorized. In less than 2 minutes, emergency lights come on and Alexander sees that his men have controlled the situation. Victor is on the floor, handcuffed. The 2 guards have been neutralized. But Marina has disappeared. Where is she? Alexander asks Victor. She's gone, as she always does when things get difficult. Alexander kneels beside Victor. The files we deciphered will be handed over to the British and Russian authorities. Your organization is finished. You don't understand, Victor laughs bitterly. We are just one cell. There are others, scattered all over the world. Oh, you can stop us, but you can't stop everyone. Perhaps not, Clara approaches. But we can stop you. And that's a start. 3 hours later, Alexander and Clara are back in the apartment. The federal police have taken over the case. Victor is arrested, and the files with evidence of decades of espionage are in the hands of the appropriate authorities. Clara is on the balcony, looking at the city lighting up with the twilight. Alexander approaches from behind, wrapping her in his arms. How do you feel? He asks. Empty, she replies honestly. For so many years I lived with questions about my mother. Now that I have the answers, it hurts more than ignorance, Alexander completes. Yes, Clara turns in his arms. But I also feel free. For the first time in my life, there are no secrets, no lies between us. Alexander gently kisses her forehead. And Marina? Your half-sister chose her side. You chose yours. Clara touches his face. You chose to protect me. You chose the truth. You chose... I chose you, Alexander says simply. Above all and everyone, I chose you. They kiss as the lights of London sparkle below them. It's a different kiss from the previous ones. Not urgent or desperate, but full of promises and hope. What do we do now? Clara asks. Now, Alexander smiles, we learn to live without looking over our shoulders. We learn to trust that what we have is real. And if the organization tries to get revenge, then we'll face it together. As we did today. Alexander pulls her closer. Clara, I spent years building walls around myself, creating defenses against anything that could hurt me. You tore them all down. Was it scary? Terrifying, he admits, but also liberating. Clara smiles. The first completely genuine smile Alexander has seen on her face since they met. There's something I need to tell you, she says, becoming slightly nervous. What? Last night when we were together, I lied about one thing. Alexander's heart races. About what? When I said I fell in love with you before I even admitted it to myself. Clara hesitates. The truth is, I fell in love with you the first time I saw you. When you walked into the room that day and asked me if I could read, something in me just awakened. Alexander feels a wave of relief and something deeper. Why would that be a lie? Because it means that, even without knowing who you really were, even without understanding the connection between our families, my heart had already chosen you. Alexander kisses her again, this time with an intensity that carries the full weight of her words. That's not a lie, he whispers against her lips. It's destiny. 6 months later, Clara is standing on the same balcony, but now wearing an engagement ring that gleams in the morning sunlight. The apartment has changed. There are photos of the two of them on the walls, Portuguese books mixed with Russian ones on the shelf, plants that Clara insisted on having to bring life to the space. Alexander is in the kitchen making coffee, softly humming a Russian song Clara taught him. She smiles at the sound. Who would have thought the most controlled man in London would hum while making coffee? Good morning, my future wife, he says, approaching with 2 cups. Good morning, my future husband, she replies, accepting the coffee. Any regrets? He asks, as he does every morning for 6 months. None, she replies, as always. And you? Only that it took me so long to find you. It's a conversation that has become a ritual between them, a way to reaffirm every day that the choice they made remains solid. Alexander, Clara says, setting her cup aside, there's something I need to tell you. He immediately becomes alert. Months of happiness haven't completely eliminated his protective instincts. What? Clara smiles, noticing his tension. Nothing dangerous, I promise. She takes his hand and places it on her still flat belly. We're pregnant. Alexander remains completely motionless for a moment. Then his eyes fill with tears that he doesn't try to hide. Are you sure? I took 3 tests. All positive. Alexander picks her up and spins her around, both laughing like children. When he places her back on the ground, he kneels and gently kisses her belly. Hello, baby, he whispers. Your daddy and mommy will make sure you grow up in a world full of love and truth. Clara runs her fingers through his hair. Do you think we'll be good parents? Alexander stands up and wraps her in his arms. I think we'll be parents who learn from our own parents' mistakes. Who will break the cycle of secrets and lies. And if it's a girl, we'll teach her that she's strong enough to choose her own destiny. And if it's a boy, we'll teach him that vulnerability is not weakness. Clara smiles, knowing he's right. They have broken the cycle. The generations of manipulation, betrayal, and violence that haunted their families end with them. I love you, Alexander Volkov, she says. I love you, Clara Blackwood, he replies. Today, tomorrow, and always. As they kiss on the balcony of the apartment that is now truly a home, London awakens around them. The city that was the setting for so much suffering and loss now witnesses a new beginning. In the office, the digital key that revealed so many secrets is kept in a safe. Not because they are afraid of the secrets it contains, but because some chapters of life deserve to be closed so that new ones can begin. Alexander still works in digital security, but now also dedicates time and resources to help other victims of espionage and family manipulation. Clara finished the translation course she had abandoned when her grandmother fell ill and now works with him, translating documents for cases that help other families find the truth. They discovered that true love is not about possessing or controlling. It's about choosing every day to stand by someone even when it's difficult, even when it's scary, even when the whole world seems to be conspiring against you. And as Clara places her hand on her belly, where a new life is growing, she knows that this child will be raised with something neither she nor Alexander had. The absolute certainty that they are loved not because they serve some greater purpose, but simply for existing. The cycle is broken. The Volkov Blackwood family will be built on foundations of love, truth, and free choice. And in London, on the 40th floor of a mirrored skyscraper, 2 lost souls finally found their home in each other.